This is the summary for Before We Were Yours. Summarized by Cellwave Audio and narrated by Archie. Introduction. Before We Were Yours is a deeply moving novel that uncovers a hidden chapter of American history, telling the story of stolen childhoods and the resilience of the human spirit. Inspired by the real-life scandals surrounding the Tennessee Children's Home Society, the novel weaves together past and present, showing how the secrets of one generation echo across time. At its heart, it is a story about family, both the families we are born into and the ones we find along the way. The story alternates between two timelines. In 1939, Rill Foss and her siblings live a precarious but close-knit life on a shantyboat along the Mississippi River. Their world is upended when they are forcibly taken from their home and placed in an orphanage where wealth and appearances overshadow compassion. Wingate captures the stark contrast between innocence and cruelty, showing how the children navigate loss, fear, and the longing for connection. In the present day, Avery Stafford, a successful lawyer and politician's daughter, uncovers disturbing truths about her family's past. As she pieces together the fragments of history, Avery's journey reveals the long shadows cast by the choices of previous generations. The novel is at once heart-wrenching and hopeful, exploring themes of identity, belonging, and justice. With lyrical prose and a compelling narrative, Lisa Wingate invites readers to reflect on the meaning of family, the weight of secrets, and the enduring power of love. Disclaimer. This is an unofficial summary and analysis of Before We Were Yours, a novel by Lisa Wingate. It is not the original book, and is not affiliated with or authorized by the author or publisher. This work is intended to provide key insights, analysis, and commentary for educational and informational purposes only. All names, trademarks, and references to the original content remain the property of their respective owners. Every effort has been made to ensure fair use under Section 107 of the Copyright Act. Readers are encouraged to purchase the original book from the author or publisher for the full experience and context. Chapter 1. Avery Stafford. A sweltering morning in Aiken, South Carolina, finds Avery Stafford poised at the edge of a limo seat, bracing herself for a day carefully choreographed to the smallest detail. The news vans lined along the curb mark the significance of the meeting, but Avery knows nothing will happen by chance. Every gesture, every word has been weighed and calculated over the past 2 months. Her father, Senator Wells Stafford, sits beside her, silent yet imposing, a presence that is both comforting and intimidating. He has always been an island of strength, a man shaped by duty and decades of public service, and Avery has long been cast as his torchbearer, the one to carry the family legacy forward. Today, though, she is painfully aware of the precarious balance between expectation and reality, between political maneuvering and personal vulnerability. As they step into the nursing home, the scent of artificial jasmine mingles with sanitized corridors, a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the carefully managed appearances demanded by Avery's world. Her mind drifts to her grandmother, once vibrant, now a shadow of herself, and she reflects on the difficult choices families must make in the face of illness and aging. Despite the public scrutiny and the whispers of political advantage, the love and concern for her family remain genuine, even as the world watches and judges. Avery's awareness of her role in the unfolding scene sharpens her senses. She navigates the event with precision, performing the delicate dance of public grace and private tension. The gathering centers on a remarkable milestone, a 100th birthday celebration for Lucy, a woman whose life story stretches back to wartime France, and her husband Frank, a fighter pilot whose love and courage are woven into the fabric of history. Avery observes the couple with awe, marveling at the endurance of devotion and the sacrifices that define a life lived with purpose. She allows herself a fleeting daydream of her own future, of a love as steadfast and unshakable as theirs, even as duty calls her back to the careful choreography of public appearances and political expectations. A gentle tug at her wrist brings Avery fully into the moment, a frail ghost-like woman from the garden, gripping her hand with surprising strength, eyes searching, pleading. The name Fern escapes in a whisper, and Avery feels the sudden weight of connection, recognition, and the unknown. In that instant, the carefully structured world around her tilts, and she senses the fragile hinge on which the story of her day and perhaps her life will turn. Chapter 2: May Crandall. Sometimes it felt as if the latches in May Crandall's mind had grown rusty, doors swinging open at random, revealing memories both vivid and terrifying. Seeing the old woman from the garden triggered something deep inside her, pulling her back 12 years to a Memphis summer that would never leave her. She saw Queenie, their strong mama, her golden curls glinting in the waning light, and felt again the tension of that night on the shantyboat. The Mississippi seemed calm, but the shadows of its waters held danger, and the air was heavy with an invisible warning. The 12-year-old girl who watched from the porch knew the river was home, her protector, yet tonight it seemed to turn against them. Queenie labored with a ferocity none of them had seen before, groaning and straining under the midwife's sharp, insistent commands. Bryony, normally steady and commanding, paced and muttered, unable to act as he should. On the porch the children huddled together, Fern clinging to her sister's small hand, Lark's tears streaming freely, and Camellia pressed against the glass, eyes wide with worry. May Crandall felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, small and knobby as she was, but understanding that something had gone terribly wrong. The night air was thick, and the approaching storm seemed only to heighten the fear that gripped them. The midwife's voice cut through the chaos, ordering Bryony to get Queenie to a doctor before it was too late. May could only watch as he wrestled with fear and indecision, each second stretching into eternity. The babies struggled inside their mother, and the danger was immediate and palpable. May wanted to rush forward to seize Queenie's tin cross and whisper the strange Polish words that had always calmed storms, but she stayed rooted, hoping her presence somehow mattered, praying that her urging would reach him. At last Bryony turned, glassy-eyed, hearing what she could not say aloud but hoped he understood. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating Queenie's face twisted with pain and determination, and the storm's fury mirrored the chaos inside the shantyboat. She reached for her daughter's hand, a silent plea in trust that somehow in that terrible moment someone could help. The river roared around them, the wind lashed at the hull, and the night seemed to hold its breath. This moment, etched in fear and courage, would stay with them forever, the past spilling into the present, a door once opened that would never fully close. The children understood in their small, fragile way that life had shifted irreversibly that night. Chapter 3: Avery Stafford. Avery Stafford moves through her morning with the practiced balance of adulthood and nostalgia. Her mother's voice booms from downstairs, yanking her from the present into the echoes of childhood. On the phone, Elliot's warm chuckle follows her down memory lanes she thought long sealed. Between their mother's sharp eyes and constant supervision, she and Elliot were groomed for goodness from the start, left little room for rebellion, yet their shared bond made the predictability almost comforting. Avery brushes the curls of her hair from her face, reminders of her grandmother's genetics and the breezy humidity off the Edisto River, preparing herself for the family's early Christmas photograph, a symbol of tradition amid the swirl of adult responsibilities and family illness. Her mind flickers to her parents' health, a raw and tender worry she cannot hide. Her mother's fear about her father's chemotherapy leaves a shadow she cannot easily brush aside. Avery feels the weight of mortality pressing into her chest, the fragile balance between life and care threading every decision. In a moment of distraction, she recalls the haunting presence of May Crandall in the garden, the old woman's thin hands gripping her wrist and eyes searching for someone long gone. Avery sees the desperation, the recognition, and the longing, and for a fleeting moment, she wishes she could become someone else just to ease another's pain. Yet, the intervention of the nurse restores order, leaving Avery to wonder about the loneliness behind May's blue eyes. Downstairs, the household erupts in organized chaos. Avery navigates her nieces and nephews, teasing and playing while adhering to the delicate balance of decorum for the family photo, and her father's precise expectations. Every action feels weighted with significance, every smile, every adjustment, a gesture of belonging and responsibility. The rituals of family, political legacy, and social expectation intertwine as Avery prepares to step into her father's world, her legal mind already cataloguing each potential scenario, each question that might arise during public appearances. Her father's guidance and the memory of childhood introductions to power form a steady undercurrent, reminding her of the trust and confidence they share, a tether to her own strength. The afternoon town hall places Avery directly in the intersection of politics and human consequence. She sits beside her father, absorbing questions about nursing home scandals and corporate neglect, translating the complex web of federal regulations into measured, compassionate responses. The audience's eyes, skeptical, hopeful, or critical, test her poise, while her father navigates the pressures of public scrutiny with practiced authority. Avery's own voice emerges carefully, threading the balance between professional acumen and the softer expectations of family duty. As the forum ends, news arrives that the elderly woman from the morning, May Crandall, has accidentally taken Avery's grandmother's bracelet, a symbol now connected to past and present loss and discovery. Avery's curiosity stirs, her thoughts lingering on May's story, the deceased sister, and a name whispered in memory, Fern. The day closes with Avery caught between responsibility and the pull of a story that feels larger than herself, a quiet knot of concern she cannot ignore. Chapter 4. Rill Foss. Rill Foss watched in horror as her mother Queenie wreathed on the shanty porch, pale and strained, while Bryony rushed after the skiff downriver. Queenie's screams and thrashing filled the night air, and Rill struggled to keep her head steady, terrified for her life. Little Gabion tugged at her skirt, too young to understand, while Fern edged closer, hands trembling as she reached for Queenie's golden curls. Camellia tried to keep the children back, but the midwife, bitter and unpaid, showed no concern, snatching Queenie's red velvet hat and threatening to leave with Bryony's hard-earned catfish. Panic and worry churned in Rill's mind. Should she gather Queenie's things, find money for a doctor, or hope Bryony returned safely across the stormy water? Camellia, only 10 but fierce, challenged the midwife, her small frame stretched across the rail to protect her mother's hat. When the woman tried to pull her off, Camellia bit down, forcing her to stumble back, and Rill felt a sliver of hope. Outside, thunder rumbled and lightning flashed, turning the night to day and back again. Rill feared Bryony might be delayed, that the skiff might have broken loose, that Queenie could die before help arrived. Her thoughts tumbled uncontrollably. Every memory of past river journeys, hustles, and dangers mingled with the present terror. Relief came when Zede appeared, steady and commanding, guiding Bryony as he lifted Queenie into the boat for the dangerous trip across the water. Rill felt the weight of her mother leave her arms, cold and hollow, yet she clung to the knowledge that Zede and Bryony could get her to safety. Zede's presence brought order to the chaos. He gave instructions for the children, calming Rill and Camellia while preparing the boat. As Queenie's cries echoed across the river, the Water Witch motor roared to life, carrying her and Bryony into the stormy night, leaving Rill to watch, worried but trusting in the experienced hands of men who had long navigated these waters. Left alone with the younger children, Rill tried to maintain calm. She served their meager meal, kept Gabion quiet, and reassured Lark and Fern that Queenie would return. She closed the windows against the rain, guided them into the big bed, and finally hung the Tin Man's cross back on the wall, the only familiar protector in a night full of fear. Kneeling before climbing in herself, Rill whispered every word of Polish she knew, clinging to hope and the fragile thread of comfort amid uncertainty, the children's restless murmurs fading as the night pressed on, leaving only the distant sound of the river and the storm. Chapter 5. Avery. Avery arrived at the nursing home intending to make a quick visit, but the encounter would linger in her thoughts far longer than she expected. After retrieving her grandmother's dragonfly bracelet from the director's office, she listened politely as the woman explained the troubling situation of one of their residents, May Crandall. The story painted a picture of a lonely, disoriented woman, still grappling with loss and confusion. Avery's compassion stirred. She couldn't help imagining someone saying the same things about her own grandmother, Grandma Judy, who was only recently moved to assisted living. The thought softened her heart toward May, and made her wonder what pain had led the old woman to wander, to take what wasn't hers, or perhaps to mistake what she saw for memories of another life. Despite being advised not to visit, Avery followed an inner tug down the hallway to May's room. The place felt stark and transient, as if May hadn't allowed herself to belong there. When Avery noticed a lone photograph on the bedside table, she hesitated, but curiosity won. Turning it toward her, she found a faded image of a young couple by the water, a man with confident posture and a pregnant girl with wild blonde curls and youthful eyes. Something in the girl's face made Avery's breath catch. She looked so much like Grandma Judy that Avery took out her phone to capture the picture, searching for proof in the resemblance. It was then that May appeared, sharp and unexpected, her frail voice cutting through the silence. Their conversation shifted between clarity and confusion. May seemed both lost and aware, her words hovering on the edge of lucidity. She accused Avery of having her bracelet, then claimed she had once known Avery's grandmother, insisting they'd played bridge together. The encounter left Avery unsettled. She could feel the woman's loneliness like a tangible thing in the room. Beneath the layers of suspicion and bitterness, there was something else, an aching familiarity that neither of them could explain. Before Avery left, May promised to tell her the story behind the photograph next time, a strange glimmer of purpose flickering in her eyes. Outside, as Avery rejoined Ian and called her mother, the world returned to its usual rhythm: road traffic, polite conversations, family obligations, but her mind stayed with May Crandall. Her mother dismissed the name easily, claiming they didn't know anyone by it. Yet the photograph lingered in Avery's thoughts, tugging at something deep inside her, something that whispered of hidden connections and old secrets waiting to surface. And though she couldn't yet name it, she knew she wouldn't be able to let it go. Chapter 6. Rill. Rill wakes from a dream where the river belongs only to them, the Model T engine briny fixed to their boat gliding effortlessly through the water. Queenie sits atop the cabin like a queen, her red feathered hat tossing back as she sings a tune learned from an old Irishman. Briny crowns Rill with a honeysuckle wreath, declaring her Princess Rill of Kingdom Arcadia. The sweetness of the dream lingers even as reality crashes back. She is alone on the shantyboat, and knocking at the door pulls her from that fleeting magic. Outside stands Zede, white-whiskered and somber, with a boy named Silas hidden under a ragged cap. Zede delivers the devastating news: Queenie's babies didn't survive. The words hit Rill like ice, a mix of disbelief and grief for the lives she had imagined holding. Zede explains Briny is overwhelmed still at the hospital, and that he'll stay behind to care for the children until he can return. Rill steps into the role Briny would want her to take, managing her siblings with a heavy sense of responsibility. Silas, the boy Zede leaves with them, is a stranger and a little frightening at first. He's skinny, with scars from a life surviving on the rails and in hobo camps, but he carries the knowledge of the world beyond the river, and his stories slowly fill the quiet. Rill and Silas share an uneasy truce as they cook, care for the children, and try to keep the shantyboat afloat in the absence of the adults. Camellia, Lark, Fern, and Gabion add chaos and life to the morning, their small hands and voices weaving through chores, mischief, and arguments, yet grounding Rill in her sense of duty and family. The calm is shattered when a man appears on the riverbank, a policeman whose presence brings immediate fear. Silas and Rill try to protect the younger children as the man tests boundaries, questioning and threatening them. The tension escalates as the children are forced into the motorboat, with Camelia's fierce resistance drawing laughter and frustration from the men. The Arcadia drifts behind them, the river that once promised freedom now a conduit to danger. As the group approaches the city, the looming buildings of Memphis stretch toward the sky like waiting monsters. Rill's anxiety grows. Should she attempt escape or submit to their captors? Miss Tan, a woman with sharp grey eyes and a commanding presence, inspects the children, her words a mixture of false sweetness and veiled judgment. She focuses on appearances, noting the perfect blonde curls and the messiness of their river-worn clothes. Rill realizes with a sinking certainty that they are not headed to the hospital to see their parents, and the river's magic, the safe kingdom of their dreams, has slipped from their grasp. Chapter 7: Avery. The morning sun bathed Magnolia Manor in a soft golden glow, highlighting the mansion's elegance despite the modern parking lot now sprawling across the former front lawn. The manor spoke of a bygone era, of formal dinners, glittering cotillions, and refined afternoons that echoed through its marble floors and white-columned veranda. For Avery, the place carried echoes of her own history. She remembered visiting as a child, when her mother had taken her to a baby shower there. Her mother had once attended a political cocktail reception at the manor, where she had first noticed Avery's father across the room, and, charmed by his Stafford name, pursued a union that eventually cemented two political dynasties. The story, recounted so often, always made Avery smile as she climbed the marble steps, punching the keypad code, with a sense of entering both history and sanctuary. Inside, the manor maintained its air of exclusivity. Behind its tall iron fences, residents were carefully shielded from dangers, whether from wandering off or the frailties of age. Avery reflected on the similarities between Magnolia Manor and May Crandall's nursing home, recognizing that both places wrestled with the challenge of providing dignity and care as life narrowed for their residents. She navigated the memory care unit, where televisions blared old reruns and some residents stared blankly out the window, seemingly suspended in moments of their pasts. Avery approached her grandmother Judy, sitting by the yellow roses at her window, and braced herself for the uncertainty of recognition. When Judy's eyes met hers, a faint spark of memory emerged. Their greeting was cautious but warm, threaded with nostalgia from Avery's childhood visits and the familiar playful rhymes that once punctuated their time together. The conversation shifted naturally to family updates and current events. Avery shared her father's recent appearances at press events and town hall meetings, careful to leave out wedding chatter. Judy's sharp mind and perceptive comments reflected her enduring grasp on her family and the world outside her room. The playful teasing between grandmother and granddaughter offered Avery comfort, a fragile bridge into the clarity she sought. Yet beneath the warmth, Avery sensed the fragility of Judy's memory, how quickly the present dissolved into past and present merged into an uncertain haze. When Avery broached the topic of May Crandall, Judy's reaction was guarded, her recognition hesitant but undeniable, her eyes drifting into distant recollection that sent a shiver of anticipation through Avery. The encounter took a sudden, mysterious turn when Judy whispered a warning about secrecy, invoking the name Arcadia with a gravity that froze Avery in place. The intensity of her grandmother's gaze and the sharpness of her caution hinted at hidden histories and family mysteries that had been carefully protected for decades. Avery's questions remained unanswered, her curiosity deepened by the fleeting clarity in Judy's eyes. As an attendant arrived with coffee, the moment dissipated, leaving her with the familiar polite smile of her grandmother, who now seemed almost entirely lost to the present. She left the manor with no answers, only the determination to dig deeper and uncover the secrets hinted at by the name Arcadia and the enigmatic history of May Crandall. Avery had a quiet resolve. She could not let the mystery rest. Chapter 8: Rill. The big white house loomed above them, its shadow swallowing the car as they pulled into the driveway. Magnolia trees lined the street, dense and majestic, creating a hidden world that felt like a fairy tale castle, separating them from the mundane activity beyond the iron fence. A battered baby carriage sat on the front porch, leaning precariously, as if warning of the care required for anything fragile. Rill watched a little boy vanish into the foliage and slip under the fence, a silent sentinel of this strange place. Next door, a boarded-up building suggested a forgotten school or church, overgrown with brambles, while distant children played without acknowledging the newcomers. The scene seemed dreamlike, its quiet tension brimming with the unknown that lay ahead. Miss Tan guided the children out of the car, asserting control over the restless group. Camellia resisted, her stubbornness sparking tension, but Rill worked to calm the storm brewing within her sister. The younger children clung tightly to Rill, trusting her quietly, while Miss Tan's firm presence reinforced the rules they had no choice but to follow. Rill's heart pounded under the weight of Fern and Gabion in her arms, but she kept a careful watch over all the children, trying to maintain order despite the fear gnawing at her. The house ahead seemed imposing and shadowed, its interior unknown, yet each step brought them closer to the unspoken authority waiting inside. Inside, the children were greeted by Mrs. Murphy, a small, intense woman with an observant gaze and a sharp manner. She inspected them closely, commenting on their appearance and making it clear that obedience was paramount. The curly-haired children, seemingly more angelic in her eyes, drew particular attention, while Camellia the black sheep received stern warnings. Rill, newly christened May Weathers, felt the weight of the names and expectations assigned to them, the identity they had always known slipping away. The older children's unfamiliar presence, the lined-up younger ones, and the whispering of Miss Tan and Mrs. Murphy beyond the door, hinted at hidden plans and a system designed to strip them of their autonomy. Fear and confusion swirled inside Rill, as she tried to piece together the rules of this house and the fate that awaited them. Hours stretched as they waited along the hallway, the little ones whining or falling asleep while Rill did her best to soothe them. A red bird outside became a fleeting symbol of hope, a messenger she imagined could carry news to Bryony and Queenie, their only link to the world they'd lost. Yet even as she fantasized about freedom and return to the Arcadia, reality pressed down, orders, silence, and the scrutiny of authority framed every moment. The children were being herded, observed, and shaped into something new, the house a labyrinth of control and uncertainty. Rill's arms ached, her mind spun with questions, and still they waited, clinging to each other and the faint hope that somehow this ordeal would end in reunion and safety. Chapter 9. Avery. Avery is caught in the swirl of her family's polished southern world, while a thread of curiosity tugs at her attention. In the limo with her parents, en route to a ribbon-cutting ceremony, she recalls May Crandall, the woman who returned her grandmother Judy's dragonfly bracelet. Avery senses something familiar in the name, but her mother, Honeybee, and father don't remember May, though they ponder the connections of old social circles and families. Avery experiments with the word Arcadia, hoping it might spark recognition. It doesn't. Beneath polite conversation and formal smiles, Avery feels an ember of unease. Something about May and the bracelet matters, and she can't ignore it. Even amidst the formalities of ribbon-cutting and VIP mingling at the country club, Avery's mind drifts to the bracelet, the photo, and the lingering question of May Crandall's significance. She tells herself not to worry her mother, whose natural tendency to fret is already taxed by her father's health and their social obligations. Avery reassures herself that she's merely curious, motivated by compassion for the lonely woman. Yet curiosity quickly turns into resolve. She will find May and understand the connection. With her parents occupied in politics and planning, Avery seizes a moment to slip away under the guise of errands, leaving the ribbon-cutting world behind. Her first detour is a family duty, picking up her niece Courtney from dance class. The child's quick maturity and energy distract Avery briefly, but the underlying tension of her investigation remains. She drops Courtney at a friend's house, then heads to her grandmother Judy's home on Lanyap Street, hoping to find answers among the meticulously kept appointment books. Each room triggers a flood of memory: roses, willow trees, the bay window, koi ponds, but Avery focuses on the goal. The hidden key grants her entry to a house now quiet and ghostly, without her grandmother's presence. Inside, Avery pores over the books, tracing her grandmother's meticulous notes and past social engagements. She discovers entries that mention Edisto Island and a mysterious Trent Turner. Could this connect to May Crandall? Who is Trent, and what was Judy planning? The books provide a trail, yet no direct mention of May appears, deepening the mystery. Avery's thoughts drift to her own relationship with Elliot, reflecting on how some moments in life, like love, arrive gradually, without fanfare, unlike the certainty her grandmother once expressed in her own journal. Determined to uncover answers, Avery calls the number in the appointment book, reaching Trent Turner. He works in real estate and is evasive, mentioning only that Judy had previously handled papers through his late grandfather. Avery probes, but Trent offers little. An envelope exists, but only Judy can collect it. His polite refusal leaves Avery with a growing sense that her grandmother's past contains secrets yet untold. A simple bracelet, a name, a few scribbled notes. These fragments hint at a story Avery is only beginning to piece together. Chapter 10. Rill. Rill woke to a damp, musty room, the air heavy with the smell of mold and wet dirt. Her eyes squinted against the dim morning light filtering through a high, tiny window, the soft squeal of a bush brushing against the glass barely audible. For a moment she tried to reconcile the stone walls and cold cement floor with the memory of the Arcadia, the shantyboat where she and her siblings had slept under the soft sway of the river. Lark whined in her sleep beside her, and the strange stillness of the basement weighed on her. The day before played over in her mind in fragments: police, Miss Tan's car, the bath line, and a sickness of helplessness and fear spread through her. She felt tainted, not from the shared bathwater, but from the way the worker had scrutinized her, forcing her into submission, making her feel exposed and small. Rill clung to the memory of her siblings as she drifted between sleep and wakefulness. Fern had squeezed herself beside her during the night, their bodies pressed together in the sagging cot for warmth and comfort. Every time she closed her eyes, the Arcadia returned in flashes, and waking meant confronting the harshness of this new place. Questions plagued her. Would they be allowed to see Bryony and Queenie, their anchors to safety? Could she protect the babies, or even herself, in this strange house? Tears came despite her promise not to cry, seeping into Fern's hair as she clutched her sister tightly, finding a small solace in the familiar warmth of family. The sound of someone moving stirred her heart, a man but not Bryony. His presence was strange yet comforting, carrying the scent of peppermint, grease and coal dust, and leaving 2 small candies on their pillows. Camellia, ever sharp and impatient, immediately claimed one, but Rill held the others, mindful of rules and the potential trouble they could bring. She reassured her sister that if they behaved they might soon see Bryony, weaving hope from fear. As Mrs. Pulnick arrived to take them through the morning routine, Rill kept her wits about her, folding blankets, corralling her siblings and silently guarding the peppermint from prying eyes, noting the big man, Mr. Riggs, watching quietly in the basement, a small beacon of kindness in the otherwise oppressive house. Outside the sun was a reprieve, the dirt cool beneath their feet, and the sound of birds singing brought a fleeting sense of freedom. Yet the iron fence and watchful eyes of other children reminded them of limits and dangers. When a red-headed boy confronted them at the churchyard gate, demanding submission, Rill's quick thinking saved them. She offered the peppermints to appease him and the other children, a gamble that worked to secure safe passage for her siblings and Stevie, a boy from the day before. Even as the redhead's warning about Mr. Riggs lingered, Rill held on to a fragile thread of hope, determined to navigate this perilous world and keep her family together, one careful decision at a time. Chapter 11. Avery. Spanish moss draped from the trees like lace veils, the air heavy with salt and memory as Avery drove toward Edisto Island. For weeks she had wanted this escape, but life had kept her tethered, her father's sudden illness, endless meetings and the weight of public appearances that came with being a Stafford. The family had hidden her father's latest surgery behind a convenient lie about food poisoning, a secret that left Avery restless and uneasy. When her sister Missy urged her to get away, she agreed, needing the distance as much as the quiet. Her fiancé Elliot was in Milan, and their wedding plans had barely moved beyond polite conversations. But this trip wasn't just for peace, it was a mission. There was an envelope, a mysterious one tied to her grandmother, and Trent Turner held it. Avery couldn't rest until she knew what was inside. As she crossed the Dorhu Bridge, The island came into view, familiar and hauntingly still. Her grandmother's old appointment books and cryptic entries had stirred questions she couldn't ignore. A bracelet, a date, and the phrase "just us" hinted at something unspoken in her family's past. The thought unsettled her. Could her grandmother, the dignified matriarch of their family, have lived a secret life, perhaps even an affair? The idea seemed impossible, but the doubts clung to her like the thick Carolina humidity. Avery needed answers, and the mysterious Trent Turner might be the only one who had them. The small real estate office on Jungle Road was modest, shaded by old oaks and kissed by the sea breeze. Inside it smelled faintly of salt and popcorn, walls lined with photographs of smiling families and island homes. When Trent appeared, tanned and effortlessly relaxed, Avery's first impression disarmed her. He looked like someone who belonged entirely to the island, sun-worn, steady, and sure. But his warmth faded when she mentioned the envelope. His stance hardened, his words turned guarded. He refused to hand it over, even when she showed her grandmother's power of attorney. He claimed it wasn't a legal matter, only a promise made to his dying grandfather. The way he said it, soft but firm, made Avery realize this would not be an easy battle. The room filled with quiet tension as they stood their ground. Avery stayed seated, refusing to leave, snacking on popcorn he grudgingly offered as a kind of peace gesture. Beneath the surface civility, both were locked in a silent war of will. When she pressed him again, pushing harder, accusing him of hiding something dangerous, his patience frayed. He snapped back, defending his grandfather's integrity, his voice sharp and full of conflict. Just as the standoff reached its peak, the jingle of the doorbell broke the spell. A park warden stepped in, cheerful and unaware. Trent seized the moment, turning to Avery with a forced calm. "Avery here was just leaving," he said. And though she turned toward the door, her heart whispered otherwise. She was nowhere near done with Trent Turner, or the secrets of Edisto Island. Chapter 12. Rill. 2 weeks before Rill fully understood the word wards, she overheard Mrs. Murphy's phone conversation from her secret spot under the azalea bushes. It was there she pieced together the terrible truth. Children at the Tennessee Children's Home Society were given to strangers if their parents never came back for them. Stevie's older sister had already been claimed. Rill felt a chill at the thought, but comforted herself with the hope that Bryony would come for them as soon as Queenie got better. Her cautious eavesdropping revealed details about sick children, and the harsh control Miss Tan and Mrs. Murphy exercised over every aspect of the kids' lives, from mealtime to appearance, and even the color of their eyes for potential placements. She glimpsed Robbie's name and realized he might be taken too, and a gnawing fear settled in her chest. Despite the fear and rules, Rill found small moments of agency. She became the invisible girl, slipping past Mr. Riggs and keeping an eye on the household, learning the routines and secrets. On the playground, she tried to shield her siblings from harm, especially the babies and Stevie, who struggled to speak after trauma. When Camellia sparked a fight with James, Rill intervened, and through a tense mix of fear and negotiation, she became James's girlfriend by his decree, an arrangement that brought her a strange sense of protection and camaraderie. Even if it was scary, James was at least honest about his intentions, and promised to help her navigate Mrs. Murphy's oppressive house. Rill's world shifted again with the arrival of the bookmobile. Finally, a taste of freedom and normalcy came in the form of books, which reminded her of life aboard the Arcadia with Queenie. She carefully chose Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, imagining adventures along the river that mirrored the one she longed to return to. For a brief time, the oppressive walls of Mrs. Murphy's house faded as her imagination carried her home. Even though her siblings couldn't hold on to the books forever, Rill found joy in the shared stories, creating small acts of comfort and connection amid the chaos. Yet the looming threat of Miss Tan's upcoming visit and a viewing party cast a shadow over her small victories. She listened from the azaleas as plans were made to present children as perfect, blonde and obedient, a business of children she barely understood but instinctively knew was cruel. Rill realized the stakes. If Bryony arrived late or the children misbehaved, they could be separated or lost to strangers just as Lonnie Kemp had been. Despite the fear, Rill carried resilience. She clung to the river and Huckleberry Finn as symbols of freedom, imagining the raft carrying her and her siblings away from control and cruelty. Even as they were dressed in finery for Miss Tan's party, scrubbed and polished like dolls, Rill held on to the knowledge that while they could be forced into obedience, their imaginations and bonds remained untouchable. Rill balanced the tension of survival with small moments of joy, hope, and strategy. She learned to navigate danger, protect her siblings, and find fragments of home and freedom even in the darkest corners of Mrs. Murphy's world. Chapter 13: Avery. The moonlight filled the quiet cottage as Avery stepped inside, her phone pressed between her ear and shoulder while waiting for Uncle Clifford to return to the line. The smell of lemon oil, salt, and time-worn furniture surrounded her, stirring memories of arriving here years ago with her grandmother. Back then the cottage had felt like a secret world, a place where holding her grandmother's hand was still allowed. Tonight that same air carried a bittersweet tension, as if the past and present were colliding under the same soft light. When Clifford's voice returned, she carefully drew him into conversation, hoping he might unknowingly hand her a clue. She asked if he remembered visits to the Edistow cottage, whether Grandma Judy had friends here. Clifford recalled she had come often to write and fish, sometimes meeting a man with a blonde-haired boy named something like Trent or Travis. Avery's heart tripped. Could it have been Trent Turner's father? After hanging up, Avery replayed the conversation in her mind while unpacking her groceries. Clifford's stories complicated things. If her grandmother had gone fishing with the elder Trent Turner, it hardly fit her theory of blackmail or scandal. Yet something still itched at the edges of her thoughts. The envelopes, the secrecy, the strange connection between their families, it couldn't all be innocent. As she put things away, her thoughts drifted back to one comment Grandma Judy had written here. Perhaps her writings held something, some hidden key. Abandoning her plan for a shower, she began tearing through the cottage, searching drawers and chests until she found an old black typewriter under a desk. The machine clicked into place with a satisfying thud, as though awakening after years of silence. Running her fingers across its keys, Avery felt her grandmother's ghostly presence, the echo of hands that had once struck those same letters in rhythm. When she discovered the ribbon still wound tight within the machine, she held it up to the light and saw faint impressions backward on the strip. Squinting, she deciphered the mirrored words until the message came clear. Perhaps we will never know, Trent, as desperately as we might wish it. Yours sincerely, Judy. The letter mentioned the Tennessee Children's Home Society. A chill swept through her as she considered what it might mean. Had her grandmother been searching for someone? A lost relative? A child given up for adoption? Images bloomed in her mind. A young woman with a secret, a hidden pregnancy, a scandal buried deep in the family's past. The more she imagined, the more questions formed, all pointing back to Trent Turner. Without thinking twice, she dialed his number, her pulse racing as it rang. Her midnight call startled him awake, his sleepy voice both intimate and disarming. When she blurted out the words Tennessee Children's Home Society, he hesitated but didn't deny knowing the name. Their conversation shifted between tension and curiosity, Avery pressing for answers and Trent dodging them until finally, after a long pause, he said, "Come over." The sudden invitation left her torn between fear and intrigue, but determination won. She sent herself a precautionary email with her whereabouts, then slipped out into the night. The beach stretched quiet under the full moon, the sea whispering secrets as she followed the path to his cottage. When Trent opened the door, tousled and barefoot, his tired eyes held something between reluctance and resolve. And when he finally spoke, the words changed everything. His grandfather, he said, had been a finder of people. Chapter 14: Rill. By the time the viewing party winds down, the sun has started to dip, leaving the Tennessee Children's Home in the long golden hush of evening. Workers gather the children, sorting them like parcels to be sent back to Mrs. Murphy's house. Rill's stomach is full for the first time in weeks, cookies, ice cream, sandwiches, even licorice whips. The treats taste like heaven, but guilt tugs at her. Camellia is missing it all. She sneaks a cookie into her pinafore pocket for her sister, praying no one checks before they leave. Everywhere she looks, strangers coo over them, sweetie pie, dearie. Precious. Miss Tan plays along, spinning her pretty lies with a smile that never falters. She boasts about the children's fine breeding, calling them blank slates waiting to be molded, as if they were nothing but dolls for sale. When she presents Gabion, now called Robbie, to a wealthy couple, Rill's unease grows. The man tosses her little brother in the air, the woman cuddles him tight, and Gabion giggles the way he hasn't since the police took them off the Arcadia. But when it's time to leave, the woman doesn't let go. She clings to Gabion, and he clings to her. "I Anna Tay," he whimpers. Rill tries to coax him, careful not to use his real name, but Miss Tan's sharp glare silences her. In a low, commanding tone, Miss Tan whispers to Mrs. Pulnick to load the other children into the cars and wait. Rill's pulse hammers. Something feels wrong. The couple steps aside with Miss Tan speaking in hushed tones. Rill catches fragments, arrangements, special fees, out-of-state adoption. Each word lands like a stone in her gut. As Mrs. Pulnick drags her toward the car, Rill looks back. The lady still holds Gabion. Miss Tan's smooth voice carries across the porch. The only sibling to this little fellow is an infant girl. Newborn. Adopted by a very prominent family. The lie burns in Rill's ears. Her mama isn't dead. Her daddy didn't abandon them. Gabion isn't an orphan. But no one listens to her. Mrs. Pulnick shoves her into the car, nails biting through her sleeve. Fern whimpers on her lap, and Lark stares silently out the window. When the car starts, Rill fights to open the door, desperate to run back and tell the truth, but Mrs. Pulnick yanks her back by the hairbow, whispering threats of the closet, cold, dark, and waiting. Fear locks Rill in place. As they drive through the night, she stares out the window, searching for the river, imagining Bryony standing on the bank, waving them down, saving them. But the river passes, the Arcadia never appears, and the hope fades. By the time they return to Mrs. Murphy's, Rill feels hollow. She carries Fern up the walk like a sleepwalker, her thoughts frozen. When they're sent outside to play, she searches for Camellia, but she's nowhere, until Rill finds her crouched on the porch, filthy and trembling. The smell of coal ash hangs heavy around her, her lips split, bruises dotting her chin. Rill kneels beside her, terrified of what she already knows. When she pries open Camelia's hand, melted peppermints cling to her palm. Rill's stomach twists. She doesn't need to be told. She drags Camellia to the rain barrel, washing away the coal dust, telling her to say she fell off the swing. Camellia stays silent, her eyes vacant. The other children gather, watching. Danny Boy taunts them until the dinner bell rings. Rill tries to hold her sister together, but that night, during bath time, Camellia breaks. Screaming, fighting, she's dragged down the hall, wrapped in a bedsheet. When Mrs. Pulnick calls for the rope, Rill knows what that means. By morning, Camellia is gone. The cot beside Rill's is empty. Fern wets the bed, and Rill doesn't scold her. She cleans quietly, slipping the damp blanket under the bushes outside. When she lifts her head, she sees two shapes in the half-light beyond the fence, a crooked old man and a tall thin boy. Her heart leaps. Zeddy and Silas. For a breath, she thinks they've come for her. But then the wind shifts, the leaves fall back into place, and they vanish into the dawn. Chapter 15, Avery. The envelope sat between Avery and Trent, plain and unassuming, but it carried the kind of weight that made her pulse race. Her grandmother's name was written on the back in an uneven scrawl, ink bleeding past the edge as if time itself had worn it thin. Trent looked uneasy, his hand rubbing his forehead while he confessed his hesitation. His grandfather's last request had been clear, but giving Avery this envelope still felt like a betrayal of loyalty. She thanked him quietly, though it did little to ease the guilt in his eyes. He explained that his grandfather's passion for reuniting families had roots in pain. At 18, he had discovered that he was adopted, a secret his parents never revealed. The betrayal had severed their relationship, sending him to the army and later to law school, determined to uncover truths for others that he'd never found for himself. Avery listened, understanding the pull of secrets and the power they held over families. Her father had always said that secrets found their way out eventually, and as she worked the flap of the envelope open with trembling fingers, she knew he was right. Inside were official papers, creased from age and careful handling. A smaller envelope emerged, already opened long ago. When she unfolded the documents, Trent averted his gaze, leaving her to the weight of discovery. The papers told the story of a baby, Shad Arthur Foss, born in Memphis in 1939 to poor river camp parents who surrendered him at birth. Avery studied the names, unfamiliar yet strangely haunting. She passed a page to Trent and read the next, a case history describing the infant's features, his mother's intelligence and his father's tall, strong frame. The words felt clinical, detached, as if life could be captured in checkboxes and stamped approvals. She couldn't imagine how any of it tied to her grandmother, yet her gut told her there was a connection. When she asked about other files, Trent hesitated again, torn between privacy and obligation. His grandfather, he said, had kept sealed envelopes for decades, unfinished cases, lives waiting for answers. Most had been returned before he died, but a few like this one remained unsolved. The fact that this file was marked with her grandmother's name meant something. It meant Judy Stafford had been searching, not hiding. Searching for someone she never found. Avery pressed for more, asking if he had ever heard the names May Crandall, Fern or Queenie, but Trent only shook his head. He hadn't touched his grandfather's workshop since locking it the day the man passed away. As their conversation faded, a small noise broke the quiet. A tow-headed boy, half asleep, padded into the room, clutching his father's knee. "Jonah." Avery smiled despite the tension, her heart softening as the child confessed to seeing a pterodactyl in his closet. With gentle humor, she told him about using flashlights to chase away nighttime fears, and his eyes lit up with wonder. Trent's tenderness with the boy was disarming. When he promised to buy Jonah a flashlight the next day, Avery saw a man who fought monsters of his own but still made time to chase away a child's. The spell between them lingered. When Trent smiled, something flickered inside her, something she didn't want to name. The dim light, the quiet of the cottage, the scent of jasmine in the night air, it all wrapped around her like a memory she'd never lived. She looked at her bare finger, realizing she had taken off her engagement ring earlier, and guilt pricked her chest. It wasn't supposed to feel like this. She told herself it was time to go, the buzz of her phone breaking the tension. As Trent walked her toward the beach, the breeze tangled her hair, and the sea shimmered under the moonlight. He offered to see her safely home, and though she refused, she knew he'd watch until she was gone. On the sand, she stopped to look back. The small cabin behind him seemed to hold more than just history, it held secrets waiting to breathe. Her phone vibrated again, dragging her back to her world in Baltimore. Abby's familiar voice greeted her, pulling her mind toward legal cases and the structured comfort of her old life. Yet as Avery listened, her thoughts drifted to the sea, the envelope, and the man who'd handed her both answers and questions. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't sure which life she missed more. Chapter 16. Rill. Sunlight finally slipped through the cracks of the basement, and Miss Dodd's gentle voice rang like a promise of something better. She was new, younger than the others, and kind, with eyes that seemed to see the world differently. Rill clung to the hope that Miss Dodd might know what had happened to Camellia, her sister who had vanished into shadows of rumor and fear. Danny Boy's cruel tale of Camelia's death haunted her, but Rill refused to believe a word. She had learned to distrust lies, even if they came wrapped in certainty. For now, her priority was protecting Fern and Lark, the two sisters still in her fragile care. The basement stank of mold and wet bedding, Fern's nightly accident adding another layer of shame and worry. Rill tried to hide it, inventing excuses, praying that Miss Dodd would simply clean it and leave, not knowing the danger these children faced in this house. Miss Dodd's compassion softened Rill's panic. When she promised the accident would remain a secret, Rill felt a rush of relief, a rare comfort that hadn't touched her since Queenie. Together they moved carefully past Riggs, his watchful eyes like a predator's, and upstairs, where the locked doors and rigid rules dictated every moment. Riggs' presence was a constant threat, a reminder of the violence and control surrounding them. Even so, Rill clung to the idea that she could protect her siblings, that she could somehow hold on to the Arcadia of her memory, the river home where they were all safe together. In fleeting moments she imagined herself running free along the riverbank, a piece of the past she refused to let go. The day twisted cruelly when Lark was led away in a frilly white dress, poised for adoption. Rill's heart clenched at the sight, and she fought an urge to scream and stop it, but Miss Dodd held her back with gentle authority. Lark, now called Bonnie, was being whisked into a life Rill could not reach. She felt powerless, the weight of separation pressing down on her chest, her young mind grasping at fragments of hope while reality cracked around her. When Miss Dodd reassured her that Lark would be safe and loved, Rill understood the impossible truth. The world could offer kindness, but it could also take everything she held dear. Tears ran unchecked as she tried to comfort Fern, wishing she could rewrite the day, shield her sisters from the cruelty of grown-up decisions. In the following days, Rill endured isolation and hunger, confined to the basement with only the solace of Huck Finn's adventures to carry her through. She imagined the Arcadia, the river, Briny, Queenie, and the life that had been stolen, weaving the memory into dreams that softened the pain just enough to survive. Silas appeared like a shadow of hope, whispering plans for escape and keeping alive the possibility of reunion. For the first time, Rill allowed herself to feel that perhaps she could reclaim what had been taken, even if only through careful secret acts. The tiny sparks of rebellion and courage kindled inside her, and though her heart ached for Fern, the promise of resilience began to take root. Even in the face of Mrs. Murphy, Miss Tan, and the relentless oppression of the home, Rill found the fragile comfort of hope, the quiet conviction that she could endure, protect, and one day reclaim her family. Chapter 17. Avery. Avery Stafford found herself drifting through Edisto Island, the breeze teasing the hem of her wrap dress, her cell phone battery dwindling and her digital distractions absent. Without the lure of emails or social media, she surrendered to simpler entertainments, letting memories and the natural world fill her hours. Kayaking through the Ace Basin earlier had left her with stained shorts and a renewed sense of her childhood self. The trip had dredged up a long-lost memory from a sixth-grade excursion with her father, when she had pursued a science fair project on blackwater ecosystems. That overnight visit had been a rare father-daughter moment, removed from competitions and appearances, golden in her mind despite the years that had passed. Memories of her childhood partner, Elliot, resurfaced as she recalled their bungled attempts to construct a massive backdrop for her science fair project. They had argued, painted, and struggled with makeshift materials, relying on her father's stable manager to save their efforts with duct tape and wooden supports. Even now, Avery could laugh at the intensity of their youthful obsession with doing everything themselves, wanting to prove they could make something entirely by hand. Those recollections made her long to call Elliot, yet she resisted, aware that the timing was delicate and that Trent Turner's call might come at any moment. Anxiety gnawed at her as the minutes stretched into half an hour, leaving her pacing the cottage and scanning for reception. Eventually, Trent did call, prompting Avery to sneak toward his cottage under the guise of casual observation. The meeting carried the awkward thrill of secrecy, as she navigated sand and dress fabric, finally catching sight of Trent among palmetto hedges. Their conversation unfolded easily, blending small talk, glimpses of personal histories and moments of tentative connection. Avery learned of Trent's past life in New York, his role in commercial real estate, and the bittersweet details of Jonah's upbringing after a tragic accident. She sensed his quiet sorrow and the weight of past decisions, and the discussion left her contemplating her own assumptions, her structured world of politics and appearances clashing with the raw honesty she found here. As Trent led her to his grandfather's cottage, he warned her of the difficult truths contained within. Inside, a small shadowed space brimmed with old files, photographs, and remnants of a meticulous life. Dust motes caught in the sunlight as Avery absorbed the room's scent, a mixture of pipe tobacco and mildew, recalling her grandfather. On the bulletin boards, photographs of children and their parents, some aged, some recent, hinted at lives disrupted and connections lost. One photograph of 4 women on a beach wearing dragonfly bracelets captured her attention. The image of her grandmother among them struck a chord, the tiny object falling from the board echoing in her memory from May Crandall's nursing home. Avery's voice barely carried as she whispered, recognizing the photograph from before, a tether between past and present, innocence and the weight of unfolding truths. Chapter 18. Rill. Rill moves through the dark house like a shadow, careful not to wake anyone. The children rustle in their beds, their soft whimpers and teeth grinding the only sounds around her. After being trapped in the basement for so long, she finds comfort in simply being near others, yet fear creeps in. The older girls whisper of Riggs, who prowls the house at night taking whichever child he wants. Rill hopes she's too big to carry, but she doesn't want to find out. She navigates the floorboards with practiced precision, recalling James's lessons on moving silently through the house to steal tea cakes. Every step, every squeak, every shadow is accounted for. She's on a mission. Once Fern returns, she and Rill will escape together, with Silas waiting outside to take them home. She wrestles with doubts. What if Fern or Bryony reject her? What if she's too broken, too skinny, too sad? She pushes the thoughts away, focusing on the careful steps ahead. Outside, the night is alive with crickets, katydids, and the cool scent of dew. Rill feels at one with the dark, moving through the yard like a creature of the river she longs for. She calls out softly, and Silas answers from the shadows, ready to help her escape. But she hesitates. Fern hasn't returned and she can't leave Stevie behind. Silas understands and promises to return for Fern, giving her the courage to plan the full escape. For the first time in a long while, Rill feels empowered, capable of reclaiming what was stolen from her, the safety, freedom and family of the Arcadia. Her confidence falters when Mr. Riggs appears suddenly, grabbing her and threatening to crush her against the wall. Fear seizes her body, and for a moment she wishes she could disappear, surrendering to darkness. But a worker arrives just in time, and Riggs retreats, spinning lies to cover his misbehavior. Rill hides in the shadows, trembling but alive, her sense of agency restored. By morning, she steels herself for the final day of captivity. She vows to bring Fern and Stevie with her when she escapes, no matter what. At breakfast, Rill narrowly avoids detection when Mrs. Pulnick investigates muddy footprints, which Riggs cleverly attributes to stray cats. The careful balance of fear and cunning continues, but Rill knows one day soon she'll be free. That day feels impossibly far, but she repeats it like a mantra, one more day. The day turns to an ordeal in the city, as Mrs. Murphy and Miss Tan escort her to a hotel. Rill is dressed in frills and a pinafore, her freedom further constrained. The city feels vast, alien and threatening. She listens from the bedroom, as Miss Tan and a man named Mr. Severe discuss adopting her permanently. She learns of his fragile wife, his desire for quiet, and the legal finality that will bind her to this fate. Heart-pounding, Rill hides in the folds of her dress, clinging to the hope that Silas will come tonight, and that the promise of escape is still alive. Even in the gilded, sunlit world of the hotel, Rill knows she is trapped, but her resolve does not waver. She must survive, be brave, and wait for the moment when she can reclaim the life that belongs to her. Chapter 19. Avery. Avery drives through Aiken, distracted by the sight of 2 girls on horseback, and reflects on the lost time and passions of her younger life. Her mind, however, is consumed with the purpose of the trip, visiting May Crandall at the nursing home to uncover the secrets tied to her grandmother and Trent's grandfather. Despite the obligations and calls she ignores, Avery is determined to pursue the truths hidden in old photographs and documents. Upon arrival, the atmosphere shifts as the familiar calm streets give way to the quiet, controlled environment of the nursing home. Avery's nerves spike as she approaches May's room, unsure how the frail but sharp elderly woman will react to her questions. Trent waits outside, adding a grounding presence, though Avery notes the subtle, unspoken connection between them. May greets them with characteristic feistiness, throwing slippers and hairbrushes, then gradually warms to their visit. Avery gently reintroduces herself and the subject of her inquiry, drawing out May's memories. May recounts her life story with startling clarity, describing her childhood on a shantyboat on the Mississippi, her time in the Tennessee Children's Home Society, and the hardships she endured with her siblings. She explains her connection to Trent's grandfather, revealing that he helped reunite her and her sisters after adoption. Avery and Trent learn that her grandmother Judy assisted May in writing her story, but did so out of friendship and compassion rather than family culpability. The revelations bring relief, though a sense of unfinished business lingers, leaving Avery and Trent quietly reflective. As they depart, the bond forged through this shared history is palpable. Trent expresses a desire to explore his grandfather's past further, while Avery wrestles with personal reflections on privilege, family responsibility, and her own life choices. Their moment is interrupted by Leslie, Avery's press secretary, who reasserts the demands of Avery's political life, emphasizing the need for public caution. Avery is forced to reconcile the pull of personal discovery with the pressures of her career, leaving her with tension between private revelation and public expectation. Chapter 20. Rill. May and Fern arrive at the Sevier house, a grand place with sprawling rooms, a wide porch, and an oxbow lake stretching toward Deadman's Slough. The children are instructed to call their new guardians Papa and Mommy, though May refuses to let the words hold meaning. She knows Queenie and Bryony are still her true parents, and she begins plotting their escape. The Sevier household is full of luxuries, frilly dresses, toys, and books, but May sees through the glamour, aware that their stay is temporary. Zuma, the housekeeper, makes it clear that the girls are only guests until Mrs. Sevier can have her own child. May watches the routines and notices the tension in the house. Mr. Sevier spends long hours in his music room, while Mrs. Sevier mourns her lost babies in the garden. Despite the comforts, May feels the weight of confinement. Breakfast is elaborate, the table laden with food, and Fern is called Beth by the Seviers. May struggles with the new names, the polished routines, and the constant reminders of what she doesn't belong to. The children are carefully monitored, yet May finds moments to explore and observe, noting the property, the lake, and the routines of the servants. She begins to formulate her plan to reach the river and reunite with Queenie and Bryony. Music becomes May's refuge. Alone in Mr. Sevier's shadowed music room, she discovers the phonograph and piano, recalling lessons from Bryony. The melodies awaken a sense of freedom and connection to her past. When Mr. Sevier appears, he doesn't punish her. Instead, he guides her through the music, showing her how to correct notes and play harmonies. For the first time, someone acknowledges her skill, praising her as talented. She experiences a fleeting sense of pride and joy, yet it's tainted by memory. The darkness of Mrs. Murphy's house and Riggs' violence flashes in her mind, turning her exhilaration into fear. By the end of the chapter, May is overwhelmed by the conflicting emotions of beauty, kindness, and trauma. She retreats to the safety of her closet, bracing the door, reminding herself that the Seviers are not her family. She clings to her plan to escape, protect Fern, and return to the river. Chapter 21. Avery. The Stafford family remains under scrutiny, as the media targets Avery's grandmother, Grandma Judy, for the premium care she receives, despite being fully able to pay for it herself. Avery navigates the tension of public appearances with her family, while relishing small, joyful moments at Drayden Hill, watching her nieces and nephews play with the horses. Courtney Lynn's fearless riding mirrors Avery's own bold spirit, offering brief relief from the ongoing stress of media attention. A surprise visit from Elliot lifts Avery's spirits. Their reunion is tender and familiar, rekindling a sense of safety and normalcy amid the chaos of family obligations and political controversy. They share easy conversation, yet Elliot gently challenges Avery about digging into her grandmother's past, pointing out the potential emotional weight and risks. Despite their differences of opinion, their bond remains strong, rooted in mutual respect and love. Later, Avery visits Grandma Judy at Magnolia Manor with a new purpose, planning a wedding that could honor family traditions while asserting her own desires. The conversation is bittersweet, as her grandmother's dementia blurs the lines between past and present. Grandma Judy speaks cryptically of destroying her old daybooks, a reminder of both her sharp mind and the fragility of her memory. Avery senses the weight of family secrets and unresolved history, leaving her both anxious and determined to protect her grandmother's legacy. A mysterious cab driver, Oz, introduces a shocking twist. He recounts taking Grandma Judy to a place on the water near Augusta every Thursday, a habit spanning years, unknown to Avery or her family. Driven by curiosity and a need for answers, Avery embarks on a clandestine journey to the hidden location. Trent and his son Jonah follow discreetly, ensuring her safety. The trip stirs conflicting emotions within Avery, her identity as a Stafford heir weighed against the freedom and independence she's grown accustomed to. On the edge of revelation, Avery approaches a long-forgotten estate, ready to confront the secrets her grandmother may have been guarding for decades. Chapter 22 Rill. Rill freezes in the sitting room, every muscle taut, as Fern loses control and wets herself for the first time in weeks. Panic surges, but she quickly acts, stripping Fern's dress and cleaning up the mess before Mrs. Sevier notices. The house feels like a trap. Their new mommy is kind, proud and dreamy, talking about trips and Christmases, but Rill knows their safety is fragile, temporary. She urges Fern upstairs to hide, as voices in the parlor make her blood run cold. Miss Tan, with her cold, calculating sweetness, tells Mrs. Sevier that the children's grandmother is petitioning for custody. Rill's heart stops. There is no grandmother. The truth, the lies, and the danger of being returned to the Tennessee children's home flood her mind. Rill listens as Mrs. Sevier and her husband argue and try to navigate Miss Tan's threat. Blackmail, legal fees, and fear of losing Fern are everywhere. Amid the sobs and tension, Rill knows she cannot risk being caught. She must act. She prepares for the escape she's been planning, sneaking Fern to the river and meeting Arnie, who promised to guide them safely down the slough to the big river. Arnie, nervous and hesitant, finally agrees after Rill persuades her with truth and the promise of a safe home with Bryony and Queenie, and the pearls Rill offers as incentive. As the moon rises, Rill and Fern slip out quietly. They meet Arnie at the boat, carefully navigating the night through the lake and slough. The river seems alive, every log, drift and shadow a threat. Fern sleeps on Rill's shoulder, unaware of the danger, while Rill keeps watch. The trio moves steadily, guided by Arnie's knowledge and the faint moonlight, until they approach the Arcadia. Relief and dread mix as they see their home now damaged and abandoned, a stark contrast to the care Bryony and Queenie always took. Silas greets them with joy, but their relief turns to heartbreak when he delivers the worst news: their mother died 3 weeks ago. The loss is staggering, leaving Rill hollow and disoriented, caught between the safety of the river, the freedom of escape, and the unthinkable grief of never seeing her mama again. Even as they finally reach the Arcadia, the mix of triumph and despair hangs heavy, and Rill understands that the river holds both home and heartbreak. Chapter 23 Avery. Avery stands with Trent before the crumbling ruins of a once grand plantation house, its pillars shrouded in ivy and time. The air feels thick with history and secrets, as if the land itself remembers what people tried to forget. Avery wonders why her grandmother, Judy, would visit such an isolated, forgotten place every Thursday for years. The question gnaws at her. This can't be coincidence, especially not after hearing May Crandall mention Augusta. Avery senses the truth isn't simple charity work or nostalgia. It's something deeper, hidden and personal. Following an overgrown path, Avery, Trent and Jonah discover a small cottage tucked along the riverbank. The place is beautiful and haunting, a hidden paradise surrounded by roses and crepe myrtles. It feels like a secret world where someone once came to escape everything. Inside, the cottage is still neat, untouched by dust, as if its owner only just stepped out. Paintings and photographs of 4 women fill the walls, Avery's grandmother among them. The same faces appear in photo after photo, captured through decades of shared laughter and love. One painting over the fireplace, Sister's Day, shows them together by the sea: May, Lark, Fern and Judy. Avery realizes her grandmother wasn't just connected to these women through some adoption story. She was one of them. Before they can process it all, a dog's bark shatters the quiet. A man named Bart arrives, tall and kind-eyed, his presence grounding the tension. He confirms the cottage belonged to May, and mentions his mother has cared for the place for years. When Avery asks to meet her, Bart agrees, giving them a tractor ride to a nearby farmhouse. Bart's mother, warm, sharp and perceptive, recognizes something in Avery's face. She calls her Miss Judy's granddaughter, before Avery even says it aloud. From a hidden desk, she retrieves an old tin crucifix and 3 worn yellow pages written by Judy herself. The letter begins in Baltimore, 1939, Judy's birthdate and birthplace. As Avery reads, the truth unfolds like a storm breaking open. Her grandmother wasn't born into privilege but stolen into it. Judy Myers Stafford had been one of Georgia Tann's babies, taken from her real parents and sold into a new life. The revelation shakes Avery to her core. The old woman beside her, named Hootsie, gently comforts her and says what Avery most needs to hear: the best thing is to know. The best way to live is to be who you are. And then she gives Avery a mission: to bring her grandmother back to May. The 2 remaining sisters, Hootsie says, must finally face the truth together. Chapter 24. Rill. Rill clung to the remnants of a dream where the Arcadia glided freely down the Mississippi, carrying Bryony, Lark, Gabion, Camellia, Queenie, and her siblings away from the shadows of Mud Island. In the dream the day was clear, the river unclaimed, and they were sovereign of its wide expanse, untethered and safe. But waking brought the sharp reality of daylight and the skiff, curled beneath ragged canvas with Fern clinging to her ankle. The illusion of freedom dissolved as the calls of a whippoorwill, Silas's signal, pulled her into the careful navigation of danger around Bryony, whose erratic presence haunted every movement. Even with Silas and Zedé offering help, the threat of Bryony's unpredictable violence meant every step had to be measured, every sound hushed, every gesture cautious. Under a tree in a small clearing, Rill received Silas's bundle of food, small but precious, a lifeline that had sustained them over 3 grueling weeks. They spoke in hushed tones about Bryony's state, the coming rain, and Zeed's plan to move the boats downriver once the weather and Bryony's temper allowed. Rill clung to hope, convincing herself Bryony would recover, that he could not remain consumed by grief over Queenie's burial. The story of her mother's Catholic funeral, shared quietly by Zedé, offered a strange comfort, an echo of a life before Mud Island, a tether to rituals and remembrance that somehow survived in the river's edge. Yet the spectre of Bryony's attachment to Queenie and his descent into whiskey-fueled madness clouded every hope. By nightfall Bryony returned, stumbling and shouting, forcing Rill to improvise a normalcy that masked the undercurrents of danger and fear. Meals were served, appearances maintained, but the truth of Zeed's looming departure and the river's call pressed heavily on her. When the Arcadia finally slipped its moorings, Bryony cursing from the roof in the storm, daring the river, challenging fate, Rill's carefully constructed world shattered. Waves tossed the boat violently, logs and drift collided, fire ignited, and the chaos swallowed her sense of safety. In the violent surge of water, the Arcadia's collapse into the river became a crucible. She and Fern were cast into the current, clinging to each other, battling the river, and facing the terrifying possibility of loss and finality. Rescue arrived with Silas and other rivermen, pulling Rill and Fern from the river's clutch, but the Arcadia, the kingdom she had ruled with imagination, courage and memory, was gone, consumed by fire and water. The dawn revealed the river wide and unforgiving, a mirror to her own loss and the irrevocable passage of her childhood. Rill, now May Weathers, understood that the past had been washed away with the river's flow. She held Fern close, carrying Queenie's cross and their mother's picture like talismans of the family that remained, and faced the uncertain future with a hard, steady resolve. The kingdom of Arcadia was no more. Its princess had to die with it, reborn in the world as May, tethered to the sister who had always been her heart. Chapter 25. Rill. Avery sits across from May in the nursing home, processing the weight of the story she has just heard. May's life, once hidden, now unfolds like a carefully kept secret, and Avery struggles with the balance between the burden of the truth and the relief of knowing. She recalls Elliot's warning to leave the past buried, yet Avery cannot ignore the importance of reuniting her grandmother with her long-lost sister, May. The consequences of exposing the Stafford family history, reputations, political futures, loom, but Avery's heart leans toward compassion over caution. May shares fragments of her youth with Avery, recalling first love, the hardships of the river and the families that nurtured her. She recounts the Severe's kindness, the music of life she learned from them, and the enduring lesson that love does not always follow circumstance. Avery absorbs the wisdom embedded in May's reflections, that life, like music, requires dancing to the tune of the present rather than lingering on the past. May's voice carries the weight of decades, yet also the spark of resilience as she explains how friendship and loyalty shaped her journey. Later, Avery persuades May to leave the nursing home for the first time in years, enlisting Trent's help. Their destination is the river cottage, lovingly prepared and maintained by Hootsey. As they arrive, May is overwhelmed by the familiar surroundings, and Avery watches her grandmother's emotional reunion with her sister unfold. The sisters embrace, hands intertwined, and even through the haze of aging and memory loss a bond shines through. Avery's parents arrive, cautious but intrigued, as the story of May's past begins to crystallize before them. Avery senses that some truths, though buried for decades, deserve to surface for the sake of closure, love, and family connection. With the sisters finally together, Avery steps aside, observing the harmony of past and present converging. Trent encourages her from the doorway, offering quiet support as Avery contemplates the implications of everything she has learned. Amid the joy and revelations, Avery also confronts her own life choices, the failed engagement with Elliot, her evolving feelings for Trent, and the uncertainties of the future. She reflects on her need to find her own music, to define herself outside of family expectations, and to approach life and love on her terms. Avery and Trent walk to the ruins of the plantation house, Avery taking photos as a pretense to collect courage for a moment she knows will come. The day, warm and sunlit, carries the weight of history and the promise of new beginnings, as Avery navigates the delicate balance between family loyalty, personal growth, and the transformative power of reconnecting with the past. Chapter 26. May Crandall. May Crandall sat on a wooden bench in the gardens at Magnolia Manor, the sweltering August air pressing around her, yet the world felt quiet and contained. She held her sister Judy's hand, feeling the steady warmth and familiarity of that touch, a lifeline across time and memory. Today, as on so many other days, it was Sisters' Day, a secret ritual they had cultivated in this serene space. Here, in the carefully tended paths and sunlit lawns, May could reclaim pieces of her past, share stories and relive the lives they had both carried, even as dementia sometimes stole Judy from her. The two of them moved through the gardens like travelers on a familiar river, tracing the contours of their shared histories, speaking softly of days that stretched back to childhood, to the Arcadia, to the river that had shaped them. Memories flowed freely for May, though they were tempered by reflection and longing. She wondered how life might have been different if she had chosen other paths, the showboat, the quiet farm, a husband waiting at home. She imagined alternate families, different children, and contemplated the turns that brought her music, her lost loves, her children and grandchildren. Even the lives she had loved and lost, husbands buried, the glittering world of performance and the distant eyes of her descendants, wove together into a tapestry she could not unpick. Sitting there with Judy, May understood that memory and imagination were bridges she could cross at will, a gift in this place where time was measured not in days but in heartbeats and shared presence. Together they recalled Queenie and Bryony, Camellia, Lark, Gabion, Fern, Silas and Old Zedde. May spoke of quiet backwaters and surging currents, of summer dragonflies and winter ice floes that had allowed men to walk over frozen rivers. Each story carried Judy along the river's path, back to Kingdom Arcadia, where their youth had been vivid, dangerous and deeply alive. The sisters' laughter rang out in the warm air, sometimes joined by Judy's gentle prompts or May's quick teasing. Even on days when Judy could not place her own memories, or recognize May as her sister, The bond between them required no proof or verbal confirmation. Love and family flowed in rhythms older than recollection, as steady and vital as the pulse in their veins. As they watched the younger generations stroll through the gardens, May pointed out Judy's granddaughter with her bow, noticing the spark between them and recalling her own family's passion, the intensity of loves won and lost. They shared the quiet delight of observation, teasing and storytelling blending effortlessly with the sunlight and shade around them. In that private moment, May and Judy existed both in the present and across the river of their past, carrying the ghosts and joys of Kingdom Arcadia, the lives of those they had loved and lost, and the enduring heartbeat of sisterhood. The gardens were alive with memory, laughter, and warmth, and for now that was enough. Conclusion. As you close this book, it's worth remembering that while the Foss children and their story are born of imagination, the shadows they navigated are drawn from very real events. The Tennessee Children's Home Society, under Georgia Tann, wove a web of tragedy and deception, where countless children were taken from loving families, exploited, and hidden from the world. Many never survived or never knew their birth parents. Some were placed in homes where they were neglected or abused, while others were shipped across the country to wealthy families, their identities altered and records sealed. Justice, when it came, was too late for most. Yet even amid the cruelty and the corruption, the resilience of children, of siblings, and of family bonds endures. Stories like the Foss children's remind us that love, memory, and hope can survive even the darkest circumstances. They honor those real children whose voices were silenced for decades, and they show us that the human heart is capable of both profound harm and profound healing. If there is one truth to carry forward, it is this: children are never objects, never commodities, never blank slates. They are human beings with histories, dreams, and desires, and they deserve care, protection, and respect. May this story, both imagined and rooted in reality, inspire awareness, empathy, and the courage to remember and never repeat the injustices of the past. This has been the summary for Before We Were Yours, summarized by Cellwave Audio and narrated by Archie.